Hi, this is Sean Hafer, and in this tutorial, we're going to get into the basics of masking in After Effects. So what we'll do first, let's start off and import the files we're going to use. I'll have links below the video where you can download the images from Pexels and the video, and you can go ahead and grab those. So I'm going to open mine up. So I'm going to go to File, Import, File, and I've got all mine together in this masking intro. So I'm going to grab that and do import folder. So I've got that in there, and you can see when this comes in, it comes in as one folder, and I'd already organized into my sort of media types. So here I've got a video folder, and I'm going to pull these out, sound effects folder, images, and now I can get rid of this whole masking intro main folder by just hitting delete. All right, so if I roll these down, we can see images here. We've got dots. We've got these Pexels images. So I could come in here if I wanted and change the name of those. So right there, we know that's dogs. So I'm going to hit enter. And now I can change that to dogs or puppies. And then we've got this one looks like a window shot. So we could say enter window, artist window maybe. And now dots is dots, so that's great. And we can come down here. We've got a ding. We've got a dog bark. And then we've got video. And if I double click this just to see what it is, okay, it is jellyfish. So let's go ahead and hit enter on that. And we'll call that jellyfish. Okay, now changing things up here. Now we could change our layer names. If we would have brought these down in as the Pexels name and then changed them down here, that is totally fine. You can do that. But if you change it up here, it will automatically come down with that name and reference it there. So that's why I just went through, changed it up in here. And then that way I know just really quickly when I want to bring it to my layer, what it is right here without having to go through. Okay. So let's start off and create a new comp, and let's just talk about what are masks. So I'm going to do a composition, new composition, and let's call it masks intro. And 1280 by 720 is great. And what I'll do, 5 seconds, and let's make this a color. I know, like I said before, it doesn't render, but let's just make it a color so we can see sort of what's going on if we need to. So just pick whatever. I'm going to pick maybe something like a light blue. And that should be fine. Yeah, everything's there. Boom, 5 seconds. Now, mine is not showing the color because I've got my toggle transparency grid on here. So if I turn that off, we can now see that background color. So we're in on that mode. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this image up here called dots, and let's drag that down into our timeline. Now we can see here in the layer manager over here, we've got our dots. It's a little small, but I'm going to leave this way so we can see this edges sticking out. If you wanted to, you could scale it up and fill the whole thing. But what we're going to do here, let's say we had this image and we wanted to create a certain shape with this image. As a background or as the filling texture of it. So we could go into Photoshop, cut it out there, save it with a transparency as a PNG or a PSD, and then bring it in. But we can also do some of that masking in here as well. So if I have my layer selected and I go up to either my pen tool up here, right? So a shortcut of G, or I go up into my different tools here. So my rectangle tool, which is Q, and if you hit Q, it'll jump between rounded rectangle, ellipse, polygon, star, and then back to rectangle. So you can always just jump through those very quickly. And you'll see that since I have this selected, my cursor has a little square with a dot in it. And that's basically telling us we're in a masking mode. If we don't have something selected, like a layer selected, you'll see it has a little star, and that means we're in shape layer mode. So if you see the star, that means you're going to create a new layer, which is a vector shape, and we'll get into that in another tutorial. But that creates a whole new layer, and that's not what we're doing in here. So if you draw something and it just sort of appears. That's what's happened is over here you can see you created a shape layer. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that and delete it. There we go. So we've got dots. So what I want to make sure is I've got my dot selected, go up into my rectangle tool, or we could do an ellipse. Let's just grab an ellipse. I'm going to click and drag. And now I'm holding down Shift to constrain it to a circle. And now you can see what's happened is it has masked our dots. So if I roll down, if you roll down over here, you can see we've got a masks group now, and under that we've got mask 1. You can see here I've got it now. If I turn on my transparency again, you can see now that's allowing this whole area of this rectangle to become transparent. The only thing we're going to see is what's inside this mask. So here toggles whether or not you see sort of your outlines of your different layers and of your masks. So we want that on, but this isn't a great color that mine selected by default to create that mask outline. So if you want to change the color of that outline, you just come over here, click on your icon, and then we can go ahead and pick a new color. So I'm just going to go for a darker version of that. Now I can much more easily see my points. Now, if you keep your mask tool on and you go, you can draw another one. So I could draw another mask. And by default, these will add together. But I'm going to go ahead and delete that one. So you can see down here we've got 2 masks. But let me delete that second one. And let's talk about how we can edit this mask itself. If I've got my layer selected, and once you draw a mask, let me go ahead and I'm going to delete my mask again. And once we draw a mask, so I'm going to go to my circle again, click in here. And once I stop, we can see all of our points are selected on that mask. So if I go up to my selection tool or hit V, now I could come in here and move that mask around. Now we can see our dots layer is not moving. We're just moving the mask over that, right? So we can move that around. Now, if we select the mask name and we just say, you can see here we've got our little arrow with the selection. I can marquee these points, and then even if I just do 1, I can move that and now move 1 point around, right? Or change that shape. I can shift select to grab 2. You can also click on a segment, it'll grab those 2 points. And you can, if you click on the point, it'll move the point. If you click on the segment, it'll move the segment. So you can get in here and create some interesting shapes. If you Option or Alt click on your shape, it'll select all your points. So you can move the whole thing that way as well. And in double clicking, you can get into the transform and you can rotate your mask around that way. Okay. And then you can go back to double click one point and then marquee select our different points. If you grab your dots layer though, say we don't have a mask selected and you start moving it, you'll see what's going on here is we're moving our entire layer. So I can show you that by if I roll down my mask here, if I go from this little add to none, you can see we've moved our entire layer. So when I'm moving this with just the dot selected, I'm moving the whole layer. But if I go to my mask, you can see it selected all of the mask, and now I can move just my mask. So it takes a little practice to get used to using this and like, oh, I've got the layer selected. Oh, I've got the mask selected. You know, how you want to do it. So it just takes some time to get used to that. But those are the basic tools there for that. Now, so when you've got none on, it's not doing anything, right? So that's great. Sometimes for fine tuning a mask, that's a great thing to do because you can come in here. I just want to fine tune this. You know, maybe I'm coming in and creating this specific shape and we can come through and get exactly what we want. Then if we want to see that, come back down to mask. And again, what you can do if you've got the shortcut for masks is M. So just like P for position and all that. And that'll come down, you'll see your mask path. But if you want to see everything, just go ahead and roll down all our options here. So mask path is the shape. Now you see there's a stopwatch here, so we can animate the mask path. So if I came in and turned on my mask path, and I moved it. Well, let's say move forward, sorry. So I'm there, animate the mask path, and move it. It's going to create a moving mask. All right. If I went in now and grabbed just a point, so I'm on this first keyframe. So if I move this, it's going to overwrite that keyframe. And then if I move forward, you're going to see it merges back out to that shape because I had set a keyframe here. So if I delete both of those and we start fresh again. So if we start here at 0, everything's fine. Set a keyframe for mask path. And then I come in and maybe I just want, let's see, move forward some, bring this one down, bring this one in. And now you can see over time our mask changes. So if I turn this back to add, now we've got our shape changing over time. So masks are really useful. You may have heard the term rotoscoping, where if you need to cut something out of a background of a video over time, that's rotoscoping. They used to have to paint that out. Now we can use things, different multiple masks and things like this to animate over time. There's also a rotobrush in After Effects that you can do those tools with too. But an animated mask can allow you to sort of, over time, obviously animate the shape of what's being masked out. Some of the other options here are we have, and let me turn my transparency off so we can see this a little better. If I want to turn off my mask shape just so I can see, what will render, we've got mask feather, and mask feather is basically just like in Photoshop. It'll just add a little bit of a feathered edge to your mask, right? So that's great. Again, that can be animated over time. Let me reset that to 0. You've got your mask opacity, and so whatever is being contained in that mask can fade up and down. Again, animatable. And then we've got our mask expansion. So this is just like we could bring the mask down small. We could bring it out beyond. Now you can see where it hits the end of the layer here, it will cut off. So you do need that layer underneath to expand or to move. You can move it off the side. So you just always want to make sure you are paying attention to your layer size. All right, so that's basically one mask. Now what we can do is we can combine masks. So if I came here, and we can also invert masks. So let's just show real quick, with inverted, that'll basically cut a hole out of our object. So if you wanted a shape to reveal something inside, you definitely could have that happen right here. Now in the next tutorial, we'll get into track mats, and that's another way that we can create transparency through layers. There's different variations and things we can do there, but in this case, we'll just stick with our mats. Okay, so we can invert to see through something. We can also, let me turn off the inverted, we can also create another mask. So if I come in here and I just go back to my dots, go up to my shape tool again, this time let's do a rectangle, and maybe I'm going to create a little rectangle here. And by default, these will both be add, and they will add together. So if I turn off my lines, that's our shape. But now you could animate within each one. If I go to my selection tool, I could just grab these and kind of move them in. If I hold down Shift, I could scale things down. So we could animate different things happening, and however that works. Now we can also get in here, and with that second mask, we can kind of do sort of like Pathfinder options in Illustrator. So if I come down here and I do subtract, it'll subtract that shape out. So we can see we can create some more complex shapes by sort of using multiple masks if we want to. We can, and then also if this moved, in and out, we could say, you could have that come in and maybe it cuts out of there over animating, right? So you could do something like that. We could also down here look at intersect. That will just show the intersection of those two masks. And then we've got difference. And that'll just sort of get rid of where they overlap, right? So that's kind of those different things we can do. We can come in here and again, add more masks if you want. They will always be connected to their parent layer. So just remember that's kind of, the way things work. So if we move this, we're moving the whole layer. if we're on just the layer. But if you want to move the layer underneath a mask, we can come up here to our pan behind tool, and then we could move our layer in separate from our masks. So if you wanted, something to be moving behind, we could do something like that as well. So remember that pan behind tool, you're basically just moving the anchor point of your layer behind your masks. So that's another thing you can do here. And then once we go back to our selection tool, we move it all together, that's its new position. Okay, so that's the basics of masks. So let's make something using these masks and have a little fun here. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new comp and new composition, and 1280 by 720 is great, 5 seconds, and background color doesn't really matter. We can say that's fine, okay. And I'm going to come in and let's create a new layer. So solid. So I'm going to say new, solid, and I'm going to go with this seems fine. So like RGB 141, 240, 183. And you can pick whatever color. I'm just going for this nice light green. And we want to make sure this is the comp size. So 1280 by 720 and hit OK. So this will become our background. So I'm just going to select that, hit enter and background. So if we come up here and look, since I had my images folder selected, After Effects created my comp inside that. So that's really handy if you want that to happen, but if you sometimes don't notice it, you might just come up without thinking, close your images, and then you're like, oh wait, where's my comp? What's going on? So just know that as a little heads up so we can bring that out. But you can also see once I created a solid, it creates a folder for us, and then it'll have our solids in here. All right. So I've got my background. That seems great. Now let's go into our images and let's pull out this puppies image, and we'll go ahead and drop that in. I'm going to put that on top of our background so we can see it. And let's go ahead and now with our puppies selected, we're going to create a little vignette mask around these two little guys. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to go to my ellipse tool and just draw a little vignette. And now with that selected, I'll go to my V. All my points are selected, right? Because I haven't done anything else. So I can just pick one and sort of center this up over these guys. All right. So that looks good. And we've got them in the mix. So now what I want to do, let's make this really into sort of a cheesy vignette. So we'll go into our puppies, we'll go to our masks, and let's turn that feather up a little bit. So let's feather out. Oh, there we go. This is a hallmark moment right here. So we've got our little vignette happening. And what we'll do, let's go forward to about, I don't know, 12 frames, half a second. And on our mask opacity, let's go ahead and turn that on so that we can animate it. And let's go ahead and bring that down to 0. And then maybe a second in, we'll see how it feels. We'll go ahead and bring that up to 100%. All right, so if we play this, oh, it's sickening sweet. There we go. So we've got our puppies coming in. These guys, they definitely look like best friends, right? So let's add some text here. So I'm going to go ahead and create some text. And I'm going to get in and do the old, I'm already on it, but let's do some Vivaldi script. So I'm going to say, best friends. Oh, this is a hallmark moment. So we're in here. I've got this brown I selected just from within one of the puppies. And we can go up to our selection tool, kind of center them up in there, a little bit of an overlap. Let's add a little layer style. So just like Photoshop, we can add some layer styles in here. So if I go to layer, come down to layer styles, we'll give it a little drop shadow. And let's come down and see where that is. So if we come into our best friends, there's our layer style right here. And now I can come into drop shadow. And let's pick, again, maybe a little brown for that drop shadow and bring that opacity down a little. Just so it gives us a little separation. It is a design masterpiece. All right, so we've got our best friends here. And what we'll do, let's throw a little audio in on this as well. So we've got our best friends. Let's come up to our sound effects folder. Let's bring in the ding. I'm going to drop it down in here right above my background. Let's see what happens here. All right, so that best friends, let's have that start about when the best friends is starting to come up. So maybe about here. Now what we can do is we can just grab this whole layer and move it on down, right? So we could bring that in. So now, oh, that's amazing. Tearing at the heartstrings. So we've got that happening. Now what we want to do is we also, but again, if you remember the shortcut, if we undo that, we brought that in. If we move to where we want it to be, remember you can just hit your bracket key, left bracket, and that'll bring the beginning of your layer to that point. So that's another handy shortcut instead of dragging it around. If you know you want it exactly there, just set it up. Now it plays. And it almost seems in memoriam. We don't want that, but let's go ahead and then have best friends come up after that. And what we'll do is we'll use a mask inside of our best friends. So we're using a mask for our vignette. And now let's create a mask on best friends to use to bring this in. So I'm going to go ahead and just draw a big rectangle around best friends. And in this case, what we'll do is now that that's all selected, so we've got it, best friends happens. And then right as that's almost there, let's have this start, being sort of faded on. So what I'll do is go back to my selection tool. I'll marquee these 2 points. I'm going to move this, I'm going to hold down Shift and move this all the way down here. And then let's go into this mask. And we can say mask path and set a keyframe. And then if we move forward, say to about 3 seconds, now we can grab, undo. So now I could grab just these 2 right here. Move that shape out, so best friends. And what I'm going to want to do too, let's go ahead and get that across. And let's see how that looks. Oh, it's amazing. All right, so as we've got our best friends coming across. And what we can do though, instead of that straight line, let's go ahead and give it a little bit of a feather. So let's get that so it looks like a softer little edge. Oh yeah, there we go. And we've got our little dog bark, so let's bring that in as well. So right when best friend starts coming on, let's get our dog bark so we know it's about there. Go back to sound effects, get our little dog bark, and let's get that scooshed down to here. See what we get. Oh, it's amazing. So if we wanted that to even line up a little more, so maybe we could move it a little bit forward, but then let's also go to our mask path and let's bring this keyframe down a little bit. Oh, so it kind of hits on the best friends, and that's a masterpiece. So again, we used masks for a couple different things. We used masks for a vignette here, right? And then we also used masks as a reveal. So again, it's an easy way to animate on some type, some text, an image, and just move through. Best friends. There you go. So if you needed to render that out, share it to your Instagram, you know what to do. Go up to composition, add to render queue or add to Adobe Media Encoder queue and export that so you can share it with friends and family. All right, let's do one more quick tutorial in this one, just so we can talk about using that inverted mask and some things we can do there. So I'm going to do one more comp, but this time it's going to be a little different. So this isn't going to be a standard video format. We've got an image here, artist window, again, that I got from Pexels. An artist window is a different, aspect. So it's actually kind of, it's in that portrait shape. And what I'm going to do now is come into here and say artist window and drag it onto our comp icon here. So it'll create a comp this size. So as that's here, we've got our artist window. Mine is at 5 seconds. That's where I was last time. But if you need to change that a little longer, remember you can always come up to composition settings, and change your time. So if we wanted that to be 8 seconds, 8.0, hit OK. So what we want to do, let's go ahead and cut out this window, and we'll put these jellyfish back behind there. So I'm going to zoom in a little, and I just use my scroll wheel. And if you hit your space bar, you can use your hand tool. And we can get in here and see what we want to do. So with that selected, if we're going to create a mask, we'll use our pen tool this time. And make sure it's selected so we don't create a shape layer. And let's draw our rough mask. So it's got this little shape here. So we'll use two. We'll go ahead and just create one. That's our general window shape. And then we'll create one. That's the shape of this plate she's painting. And then we will subtract that from that. It'll be a lot easier than trying to create a really crazy custom shape. So we'll come in here, click, and I'm going to guesstimate about where that window would be. All right, and that looks good. Now this is another place. So if we roll down here, we can see we've got our masks now, and we've got this mask. This is another place where it's really useful to be able to turn off what your mask is doing. So if we go to none instead of add, now we can really fine tune this. So I'm going to zoom in some, hit my space bar so I can go up to this corner and see where I'm at. And again, I can grab that, move it over. Same thing over here. It's a little bright, but just get something close. Maybe this should be actually over here. Great. That looks good. Let's move this one over a little bit. And same thing here. This seems to be maybe about here. Let's just see how it feels. All right, looks good. Okay, we might need to tweak it a little later, but we'll just see how that is. And now with that same artist window selected, let's create a mask that'll cut this little piece out. So I'm going to zoom in a little, and I'll go back up to my pen tool, and I'll start somewhere maybe here. And just like Illustrator, just do your Beziers, and we can see what we get. All right, so that looks a little janky. So let me go ahead and turn that to none so I can really zoom in here and see what we can do. So again, go into your selection tool. In your pen tool, you do have all your options as far as add vertex, convert vertex tool, all of that as well. I'm gonna go to my selection tool and just see what I can do here. So here, I know this needs to be more of a corner. So if I hold down my Command or Control, I can do that one just on its own and draw that, pull that up so we can get that a little nicer. It looks closer. Same thing down below. Again, hit your space bar, move here. Let's check this one out. Got kind of a combo of these two. So let me grab this one first. See if I can get that feeling a little better coming into that corner. And then same thing, a little Command or Control. So what we can do, and actually it looks like I can move that whole point a little bit. And really all we're worried about is this little arc up here. The reason I kind of drew the whole thing was just hopefully to, you know, get that arc to feel natural. Because really that's the only part of the window that will be visible in this. All right, so let me zoom back out, see what it looks like. I think it's pretty close. So that looks good. Now what we're going to do here is let's go ahead and make this one inverted. Okay, and I'm going to go back to add. Right, so now that's showing through our background, and that's just, remember, that's transparent. And then with this one, we don't have to invert it, but if we have add, since this is inverted, it's almost like the negative. So if I went down here and said, oh, I want to subtract this one, it's going to add it because it's adding a negative, adding to a negative. So just think about once you have your first layer inverted, everything else is going to do the opposite. So it's just something to remember. But in our case, we want it to add because we want it to subtract, right? So now it's cutting that out and we've got our little background here. So now we've got that. That looks good. Let's go up here and grab our video. We're going to pull jellyfish down below. And now we can move that to wherever we want that to be. We've got our jellyfish now, and that'll play through the window. So we've got this weird jellyfish playing behind. So this is a little, you can see some of these edges. So this is where some fine tuning of maybe taking the mask, feather, just a couple pixels, right? Nothing too crazy. And on both of these, do the same thing down here. And we can turn our edges off just so we can really see how much that's affecting. And then you can even play maybe with the expansion, bringing it negative. You know, if we just want to really create that nice blurred edge. Same thing up here with mask 1. Maybe we just want a little bit of expansion on that, so it feels a little better. And maybe that's too much of a feather, so we could get, there we go. And so get that in. And then I think since this is so, I mean, this could be a depth of field vibe, but I think since she's a little soft, and this image is a little soft, we get to add a little bit of blur to our jellyfish. So I'm going to go to jellyfish, go up to my effects, come down here to blur and sharpen, and let's jump and just do a Gaussian blur. And now you can see what happened. It's down. All of our effects will be now in an effects area, and you can roll these all down. But also what happens when you start adding effects is it comes up in this tab here. So you've got your project tab, then you've got your effects tab. And so any effects on your layer that's selected will show up in that effects controls. And if this is too small and you can't see it, you might get a little arrow over here, a little caret. If you click on that, you'll be able to see both names for the project and the effects control tab. So if you can't see it, that's what there. So like if I make this smaller, I'll show you what I mean. So here, if you can't see the whole thing, now you can use those little guys and go to project, and then jump back and forth. Okay. All right, so now we've got that on here. Now it doesn't look like it's doing anything because by default, it's at 0. So we could go ahead and just add, we could go crazy and add a lot of blur, but maybe we just want a few pixels to sort of match it. See how that feels? All right, so there we go. It's exciting. And then we could come in here and I'm going to maybe it looks like if that was really what's going on outside our window, we'd probably get a little more blue on her, right? This inside of this room would be very blue. So let's do a little adjustment to that image. So I'm going to click on Artist Window. Let's go to Effect. We'll go to Color Correction. And let's do CC Toner. And now here, you can see by default, it sort of gave us this sepia tone kind of vibe, but you can see what happens up here in our effects control panel. We've got, you can pick tritone, duotone, pentone, you can get anywhere you want. You can just do a solid if you want to go just want to color over it. So we can go to let's go to our tritone again. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and pick some images from my jellyfish. So maybe something like that for my highlights. Let's go for midtones. Let's get one of these lighter blues. And then for my shadows, I think we might want to just leave it black just so we keep that contrast up. Maybe a hint of blue, but I think, somewhere around here might be nice. And we can get in there, and maybe with our highlights, we can give it a little lighter. All right, we've got that. And then what we can do is blend with original right here. Just sort of bring that down a little. So we just get some of that blue, but it's not too much, and that's up to taste. So we could come in here now and say, she's doing it. Now in reality, we would have some movement of the light because of these guys doing their thing and all that. But I think we're fine there. So we've got this here. The video is a little longer. So I think we're at 10 seconds since I made that longer. If we wanted that to be there, just originally, since my artist was only at 5 seconds, we did that. So I said, I can always just drag that out, and then we'll have our whole video at 8 seconds animating through. All right, so that's another way that we could use masks and then combine our masks if we need to cut out something. This could, again, be a way to replace a screen on a mobile device if you want to put an interface on it, change a billboard in a video or in a photo to something else that fits your narrative, all of these things. So we did a mask a few ways, did combine some masks, used a few different effects, and I hope that helps you understand the way masks work. Well, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.